Hey everyone, Dunrovin Ranch. It's on a very cold October 4th afternoon. This is Suzanne Miller, owner of the ranch, and I'm talking about tall tales from life's trails. And I have to tell you that I did a last minute switch on topics today because I had planned to talk about our river rides. And I wanted to focus that on Gabby's recent visit to Dunrovin because I took some photos and even a short little video of Gabby on our river ride. But Gabby is in transit to Atlanta, so she will not be able to join us on chat. So I didn't want to do that with her not being here. So I did a sudden switch. And what I have switched to is I'd like to talk about my dog, Jewel. And I'm going to try to call her over here. Jewel, come on, girl, come on. And of course, if she comes, Paula has to come as well. But the reason I wanted to talk about Jewel is October is her birthday. It's not really her birthday, but it's the anniversary of her having come to Dunrovin. And so I wanted to talk. Give her, Jewel. Jewel, over here. Say hello to everybody. Yeah, you gotta come and say hello. Yeah, this is my Jewel. And she gets her name from the little white piece on the back of her head, Jewel. But she actually came with that name from the Humane Society, Western Montana Humane Society, which is actually very close to us here at Dunrovin. But I wanted to tell Jewel's story. And I hope that you will chat because I can see the chat from here, and I'm happy to respond to any of the things that any chats that you might have. First of all, can everybody hear me? I hope that they can. I'm looking here at the chat, and I think people are talking here. Okay. I had to turn the nest cam off. I'm hearing you fine. Okay, great. All right, Jake, would you bring up the first photo? And then let me know that it's on so I can then go ahead. Is it up? Not hearing Jake. Okay, is it up? It is up. Okay. Well, this is actually a photo not of Jewel, but of two dogs that lived at Dunrovin before Jewel. And it's really not possible to tell Jewel's story without telling their story. And in the photo, you see the white dog on the left. His name was Keeto, K-E-E-T-O. And the other dog on the right, which was a part Catahoula dog, was Jake. And Jewel came into our lives after a tragic accident that I myself caused, took Jake and Keeto together. They died together. And I wanted to talk a little bit about them first. So if you go to the next photo, Jake, this is of Jake. And it's you know, people say it's strange to have a son named Jake and to have had a dog named Jake, but the truth is that Jake, my son, changed his name to Jake, and at the time Jake was known as Ted, which was, and I'm happy with the fact that he changed his name, not a problem. But this was our dog Jake, and he came as a puppy when the boys were fairly young. He was a part Catahoula. He was a wonderful trail dog. You see the little orange vest on him. Well, he could easily get lost in the woods because of his colors. He would just disappear. And he was a very interesting dog in that he would kind of be his own person. He loved going with me, but he would do things his own way. And I had some troubles with him at first chasing wildlife. You know, I had to resort to some, you know, really strict training to get him so he would not chase wildlife. And one time across the river here, I was up by myself with Jake, and he got too close to an eagle's nest, a golden eagle's nest. And a golden eagle saw him and came down and swooped down and attacked him. And I was at this point quite a ways away. He was way in front of me, and I couldn't do anything about it. But the eagle just made Jake roll down the hill, and I went as fast as I could, but it was very steep. I couldn't go too fast. And Jake was fine, but he rolled halfway down the hill across the river because of the attack by the golden eagle. He loved to chase things. There was no question about that. But we finally got to the point where he would not chase deer. He learned that he could chase small animals like rabbits and squirrels, but not deer and large wildlife. And he was a fabulous trail dog, always running around with us and just loved us, and we loved him. And then if you go to the next slide, Jake, this is Keto. And Keto came into my life via my good friend Con Ovnik. This was a dog that had been abused by a neighbor of Con's, and Con went to the neighbor and asked if he could have the dog, and the neighbor gave him the dog, but Con really didn't have room in his life at that point for a dog, so he asked me if I would take the dog, and I did. And I don't know if you can see in this photo, but Keto had a tongue that was black and white, black and pink rather, and we called him Mr. Mutant. We called Jake Mr. Wiggly Bottoms because his tail would just go like crazy, and he couldn't stand it when people would argue in our family. He would get between whoever was arguing and wiggle his bottom to the point where you could no longer be arguing because Jake was making sure that you didn't. And he and Keto were fabulous trail dogs. Both of them went with me for miles and miles and several years. And then this tragic accident happened, and the next slide shows a plaque, a memorial that is on a tree down by our river, and you can see that it's getting a little bit rusted from the weather, but it's a plaque that Sterling put up when we buried these two dogs who had died together. And I'll tell you that their death was more than devastating to me. It was horrific. And it was horrific because, as I said, I caused it. And I started to doubt myself as a dog or animal owner. I still had a lot of horses, and I remember the first ride I took on Power after Jake and Keto were gone. I was just full of grief. I could hardly stand going down the trail without my two trail dogs out in front of me. And I remember a red-tailed hawk flew over me, and with its very distinctive call. And many Native Americans believe that the call of a red-tailed hawk is the call of a deceased person or thing that was close to you. And in that moment, I felt that the red-tailed hawk was calling Jake's and Keto's spirit to me. And it was a really, really difficult time of my life because I really didn't know what to do to overcome the grief that I felt because I had caused their deaths, and it was just really altering for me. It was a very difficult period in my life, and I thought about not getting another dog because I was angry at myself. And then one day I was reading the newspaper, and this was in October of 2006, 2007, after they had died in early July. And the Western Montana Humane Society was talking about a new litter of puppies. And so I asked my youngest son, Mark, if he'd like to go over and check out these puppies. And he said, yeah, let's do that. So we went over to the Western Montana Humane Society, and we got to talking with the people at the center and telling them that we lived on a guest ranch and that this was what we wanted in a dog. And they said, well, I don't think these puppies will fit your bill. They all had some aggression in them that was a little bit worrisome about being around other dogs and about being around lots of people. And so they said, but we think we have just the ideal dog. And her name is Jewel. And they brought her out. And the thing of it is that Jewel had gone through three sets of owners before she came to us. And she was back at the Humane Society after having been displaced three different times with three different people. And they figured her age was somewhere between 2 and 3 years old. And when I first met Jewel, I'll have to tell you that I was not all that taken. And the primary reason that I was not all that taken was that she paid no attention to us. She paid no attention to my son, and she paid no attention to me. She was really bonded with the trainer there at the Western Montana Humane Society. But the trainer said to me, "Well, I'm sure that this dog will transfer her affections once she comes to trust you. But she's been through three different situations now, and she's become a little hesitant about trusting people. But she's a wonderful dog and passed all of the dog intelligence, both emotional intelligence and innate intelligence. And they said, so I think you should give this dog a try." And so I said, okay, well, we'll give it a try. But I wasn't convinced, I'll just be honest with you, because she would barely look at us. I mean, she was very reticent to look at us. And if you're seeing the next picture, which is kind of dark, I'm sorry that the lighting is not better, but this was taken the day we brought her home. And you can tell she's not even looking at me there. And you can tell it is the fall of the year. You can see the bush behind her, which is now a very big bush because this is now over 10 years ago. She didn't even look at me then. And, you know, I remained uncertain of whether we wanted to keep her because she just wouldn't look at us, you know. But she started to warm up, you know, after a few days, particularly with Jake and Mark playing with her. She was very playful. They finally got her to kind of open up. And so we decided to keep her. And boy, are we glad that we did. I mean, Jewel has just been an incredible dog for me. I'm going to go to the next slide, Jake. First of all, I want to extol her many virtues. And one of her virtues is she is terrific with other dogs. I mean, consistently terrific with other dogs. Doesn't matter what the other dog is doing. I've only seen her show aggression once or twice in her life. And that's when another dog was, you know, getting between her and me, or her and her ball or stick that she was playing with me. And if you spoke to her, she would calm right down. She never showed any aggression for other people coming or other dogs coming around her food or anything like that. But if she was in the middle of playing with somebody, she didn't want interferers, people to interlope in her play. And the next photo is of Jake, a young Jake, playing with her in the hay barn. And she loved to wrestle. And both my boys would wrestle with her quite a bit. And you can see that I kind of like that photo because Jake is clearly having a good time, and my horsepower is in the background, seen through the barn in the arena, and Jewel is on her back having a good time. And whenever you wrestled with her or played hard with her, she would, you know, use her mouth, but never in any kind of a hard way. She would put her mouth on you and just and groan and moan because she was having such a good time, and she would never allow herself to hurt you in any way. And ever present, the next slide, Jake, was either her ball or a stick. I mean, she is fixated on balls and sticks. She is part Black Retriever, part Pit Bull, and she loves nothing more in life than to retrieve. And for years, when we would go out to be with the horses, she would find one of her balls and carry it around and position it strategically in front of her so that when you saw her, you saw the ball and you would toss the ball. And that's how she would lure people into playing with her. And if she didn't have a ball, she'd look for a stick. That next slide, Jake. And this is a collage, a little series of me throwing a stick in the back country. And in the upper left, you'll see I'm taunting her. She would just fixate on that stick, and her body would go completely taut. And I used to love to just, almost torture her with the stick, because I'd put it up close to her face and her eyes would follow it. And I'd make her sit very carefully. If she moved her bottom, I'd say, no, gotta sit. And I would move the stick very closely and very carefully with her eye on it all the time. And then all of a sudden I'd throw it and off she'd go. She'd explode in this burst of energy. She was just marvelous. And then the next slide shows her happily coming back with the stick. And this would go on for hours if you allowed it. And this would be after a long trail ride. Didn't matter. I mean, her energy was totally boundless, which, made for a perfect ranch dog. And in the next photo, you can see she has her stick, and she has, I like this particular photo because she has also got her legs crossed. This was a very typical way of her sitting with her front legs crossed. And she is after all a lady, and she comports herself like a lady with her crossed legs. The other thing that she loved as much as getting a stick was being in the water, and sticks or balls in the water was heaven on earth for Jewel, and continues to be. Although I'll get to that later. As she's grown older, these things have slowed down a little bit, but that doesn't mean she still doesn't have the spirit. But I really love this photo, the next photo, Jake, of Jewel in the water with the stick. The water is gold. This was taken by the person who owned the other black dog that you saw a moment ago, a woman who used to work here, a very good photographer. And I just love this photo because, Jewel is coming across the river with her stick in her mouth, just full of joy. And the next photo, Jake, if you wouldn't mind, is another photo of her in the water. And I have to tell you, it's been so much fun to take Jewel down to the river with a chucket and a ball, and to throw the ball anywhere in the river, and she absolutely intercepts it no matter where you throw the ball, whether you throw it upstream, so she has to swim against the current, or you throw it downstream and she's swimming with the current. She has it completely scientifically down to a nanosecond where that ball is going to be given the river's flow. So if it's downstream, she'll run along the shore and go in and intercept it. She won't swim towards the ball. She'll swim towards where the ball is going to be. And she has it perfectly calculated. And guests are always amazed, and I tell them, throw it anywhere you want. Throw it upstream, throw it downstream. This dog will get it by swimming a straight line to where the ball is going to be, not to where the ball is right now. And people are always amazed. So this has been a great joy for both Jewel and I to live on the river and to be able to play in the river. And on our morning walks over the last 12 years that she's been with us, or 11 years, she's done this almost every morning except in the wintertime. I would take the chucket. I know many of you see me walk off with my toys for the dogs, and she always had a chucket. I'm not doing that right now because Cola's not going with me, but I will go back to that. And I still do take the ball and chuck it, but we don't do it as much. And I don't have her go as often because she wears out. But my mornings have been filled with throwing the ball for Jewel. Next slide, please, Jake. And the other asset of Jewel was her total patience. This photo is of Jewel and a big dog named Ursu, which is Romanian for bear. This was a dog that we went to the Montana Humane Society to get for my then ranch manager, who was from Romania, Daniel. And he named it Ursu. And Ursu was this big, lovable dog. And Jewel just scooped him up and brought him into ranch life. And they were very, very good friends. Next slide, please. And in this photo, Jewel is playing the part of a reverse Dalmatian when I had Senior Kona in the homecoming parade. We needed a Dalmatian, but we didn't have a Dalmatian. So we took white polka dot stick-ons and put them all over Jewel and called her a reverse Dalmatian. And again, see how her legs are crossed? They're very ladylike, even though she looks ridiculous with all these white spots all over herself. She had a fabulous time in the parade because everybody would pet her, and she just such a great dog for what we do. Wonderful with kids, wonderful with parades, and wonderful no matter where you are and what you do. I will say the only trouble that we had when we first got her was she was scared to death of being abandoned, and with good reason because she had been abandoned for 3 times due to no fault of her own. And one family moved away and was moving to a place where they couldn't have a dog. Another man got married and his wife would not allow him to have a dog. And there was always something that wasn't her fault, but she always ended up back at the pound. And so she had real separation anxiety. And so I remember the very first time that we left her in our car, which is now Jake's car, and Jake is on here so he can verify what I'm saying. But she wasn't in the car for very long, but when we came back, the interior had been redecorated. She had torn off parts of the ceiling. I mean, she was frantic to get out of there. She just was absolutely convinced that we were not going to come back. It was the first time she was ever left alone and was just frantic. She was just, it made us sad, but she also, left our car in tatters a little bit. So Jake still drives that car and it's still tattered over the ceiling. And I also remember the first time that I left her outside of a store or something. And this was at a lodge in the Elkhorn Mountains, and my younger son and I were on a horse trip, and we were staying at a cabin, and we had the horses with us, and we were riding every day out from this cabin, and we decided to go up to breakfast and at this lodge, and I left her outside the door. And this is the first time I had attempted to do this, and I was a little bit worried about whether she would stick around or what she would do. But she more than stuck around. She stood up and put her paws on the window and watched my every move while I was in this lodge. I mean, and if I moved from one room to the next, she moved to a window where she could keep her eye on me. I mean, she was just keeping her eye on me like glue. And this went on for about the first 3-4 years where she was, had us, clearly in her sights. And then, it suddenly dawned on her that we weren't going to go anyway. We weren't going to leave her ever, and that she was here to stay. And she settled in and became really confident about it all. And she's now totally confident that we're not going to leave her. But let's go on to the next slide, which shows her nemesis, of course, is Cola, Senor Cola. I mean, my little dog, Cola. Cola thinks he's entitled to anything that's in his sight. And he sits on her, he harasses her, he barks at her, he growls at her, and Jewel is just unbelievably patient with him. And the next collage that I have shows a series of photos, all that kind of have to do with her being on the trail with me. She loves to ride in the front seat of the car. She thinks of herself as a person. She's not a livestock. She doesn't belong back there in the trailer. That's for the horses and things. Those are livestock, and she's a person, and she belongs preferably in the front seat of the car sitting next to me. But, in a pinch, she'll get in the back seat. And she has it all figured out. She watches what goes on around the trucks and knows what's happening, and she tries to position herself so that she can get in the car in the right place at the right time. And you can see in the lower left-hand part of that photo, Cole is sitting on her. He does this all the time. In fact, I know some of you have seen this on the ranch camera, on the front of Kelly's office. Joel will be sitting there, and Cola will come by and lift up his rear end and sit down on her. Amazing. And then the photo I really like over on the right-hand side is how the dogs, whenever we stop on a hot, dusty trail, they'll sit in the shade of the horses. They're both good trail dogs. But the next slide is Jewel in the back seat of our truck. And this is so funny. I love this picture because she's not looking at me. If you can see, her eyes are looking away. And the reason is she feels that if she doesn't look at us, we won't be looking at her, and we won't notice that she's in the back seat of the truck. She knows that we have too many people, and she's going to have to ride in the trailer. And I never make her ride with the horses. It's always in the nice cushy part up front of the trailer with her own bed and everything, but that's not good enough. She wants to be with the people. And look at her. She tries to make herself small and fit in the corner of the back seat of the truck. And then if you open the door, she looks away because she figures if you don't, she's not looking at you, then you're not looking at her, and she can get away with just sitting there, and we'll all just make room around her, which of course we can't do. She's a big dog. But that's definitely her modus operandi when there are a number of people that have to get in the truck. She tries to save her seat by becoming an invisible part of it. And then the next photo is of Jewel on the trail with me. This is in the Bob Marshall Wilderness area. That's my horse, Power. And I just love this particular photo for a lot of reasons. She just looks so alert and so trim and so beautiful in this photo because she's just all alert and all ready. And for years, this was the way she lived her life. I mean, she was on the trails most of the time. I mean, she just, every time I went, all I'd have to do is put on my riding shoes and she would watch me in my office. And once the riding shoes went on, man, she was out there to the truck. She was not going to be left behind. And the next photo is of her with me and Chinook up on a mountain. And you can see her jumping up beside me. And she would do this a lot. And whenever we would stop, she'd come up just for a little pet, just to say hello, just, you know, it's just to be a friend, to come up and say, oh, aren't we having a good time, Mom? Isn't this fun? Oh, this is so much fun. And she would just come up and be joyous. She was so expressive in everything that she would do. And in the next photo, she's doing that again with me in Power. I mean, she would do this all over the place. Just all I'd have to do is bend over and put my hand down. And she would come up and say, oh, aren't we having a good time? And she would lick my hand and talk to me for a moment. And then she and I would be off. And she was always off in front of me down the trail. And in the next slide, you can see that she's drinking from a water bottle. And this was just the cat's meow, because there would be places where I would go where there was no water to drink. We'd be going for long stretches, and of course she would need to drink water. Well, she learned how to drink out of a water bottle, and she would look up at me and tell me when she needed a drink, and I would stop and bend over with my water bottle and squirt it out, and she would just lap it up and drink. And so I ended up carrying extra water bottles for her, and I didn't even have to get off of my horse to make sure that she got water. And then this last photo is of me walking with Chinook and Jewel on my left there, and her tail is up and her ears are forward. And I just love this photo because this is me in the best element possible, with my dog and my horse, just, you know, in Montana's mountains. And I have to say it's a huge privilege for me to grow old with Jewel. As I started to explain a little bit earlier, as my own body has started to fail, I've watched her body start to fail too. And I feel like I have a friend to get older with. Our morning walks are not as long and not as vigorous. I take the ball and chuck it, and I only chuck the ball a couple of times. When we get to her favorite part of the river, which is a slough, about half a mile or maybe 3/4 of a mile from here, I throw it in only once or twice, but I used to have to throw it in at least a dozen times for her to feel satisfied. And now often, if she doesn't want to continue to play, what she'll do is she'll get the ball and carry it and not bring it back to me. She'll just carry it along. But so she still feels like she's part of the game, but she's, you know, not running as far and as fast. And of course, her muzzle has got gray hairs, just like my head has gray hairs. And it now takes a stool to invite her into the back seat of the car. I have to put a stool out so that she can get up with her knees, and her legs are giving her trouble just like mine are. And I need a mounting stool to get on my horse. I have to have somebody else saddle it. And I'm just really happy that we're both still here and enjoying each other's company. This is the first year that I have not taken her on a horseback ride. She's not up to it anymore. She she gets thirsty, for one thing. She has a hard time holding water, and so I'm very careful about where I walk her and in what kind of conditions. I want to make sure that there's water along the way, and she no longer can stand up and get water from me on the horse. And I just don't want to stress her in that way at all. So our walks are pretty short now, but she still gets in the car with me and likes to go because she has to feel part of, what's important around here. She still has to, she's got her job, and that's making sure all of us do our jobs. And I can't tell you how much I love this animal. I, you know, I cry just thinking about it. I, I don't know that I did deserve her, but boy, I tell you, I got the best dog in the world when we went there and they talked me into taking this dog home and giving her a try. She's just been the love of my life. And I can't say that any dog has been as faithful and as loving towards me as Jewel has been. I've had a lot of wonderful dogs, and I've loved them all, and I know they've all loved me. But Jewel has a special place. The thousands of miles that we've ridden together in the back country and enjoyed those trails together has just been one of life's greatest rewards. And I want to thank you for sharing, Jewel. And this is her 11th birthday with us. She came to us in August, and that makes her somewhere between 13 and 14 years old, so she's getting up there. But my hope is that she will have a long retirement along with me, and that we have some still fun days ahead of us. So if you have any questions for me, go ahead and chat. I can see the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them if you do. Just let me know. I'm going to watch the chat here for a moment and see if you have anything that you'd like to say. Well, thank you all for sharing her with me and for listening to my stories about her. It makes me feel good to tell everybody how much she's been for me. And I thank you for joining me on this. I see somebody typing, so I'll wait and see if there's a question. Tell us about Lady Lonza lactating. Well, mares will go back into lactation when the foal is around, and I personally have not seen this. I'll have to talk with Kelly. I doubt that it is milk. She may have some discharge. She may actually be coming into heat. So I'll have to go and look. It is true that foals can bring mares back into lactation, but I would think by this time, and he's almost a year and a half now, that she is not lactating. But I'll have to go and look. But yes, that means producing milk, and they can go back into lactation just by having the mare around. In fact, Lonza brought Annie back into lactation, and some of my gates, you'll notice around here, have that no climb wire on them, and that's because when Lonza was a foal, I separated them, and they'd be nursing through the gate. So that's, but I don't think that's probably happening now. I will go and check on that to make sure. Yes, I read that, but okay, thank you. Well, thank you all for joining me today. And I look forward to next week. Next week, I will talk about our river rides, and I will have some fun photos of our own Miss Gabby, who went on a river ride with us. And I even have a short little video of her crossing the river. So with that, I'll say goodbye, and thank you for joining me. Loved it. Bye.